Well, good morning and welcome to our virtual service. My name is Reverend James Parker. We have a lot to cover today. I'm going to jump right in. My lesson title today is Building Self-Awareness, Part 1. Friends, there's no better time for self-awareness than now. Studies show that under current conditions, a third of all people are showing signs of anxiety, fatigue, or depression. Some have lost themselves in the disorder and madness of present life situations. Even more, these dark times are causing some to experience weariness, weakness, trauma, and signs of disassociation. Within today's trials and tribulations, there seems to be an internal conflict at work. It's man versus self, or human versus spiritual. Basically, uncertainty versus certainty. In 1859, Charles Dickens wrote a historical novel titled A Tale of Two Cities. It opens by stating a profound message which speaks to the dichotomy of some assumed and different forces at work. He wrote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." This passage suggests an age of radical opposites taking place. It points out a major conflict between family and love, hatred and oppression, good and evil, light and darkness, and wisdom and folly. Dickens begins this tale with a vision that human prosperity cannot be matched with human despair. He also tells of a time of despair and suffering on one hand, and joy and hope on the other. It is clearly a statement which describes the double-mindedness, double vision, and internal conflicts of those who are focused on differences, chaos, misunderstanding, inner turmoil, dark times, heightened tensions, and outer and worldly conditions. Sound familiar? Yet in a moment of great awareness and selflessness, the book ends with an equally even statement, one of my favorite statements of all time. "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." These lines, probably the most famous in the novel after the opening lines, are not actually spoken aloud. They are the unuttered final words of the novel's hero, following closely after the biblical quote, "I am the resurrection and the life," Jesus' words in John 11:25. They clearly indicate a spiritual context and are meant to be read as self-sacrifice, as noble, gallant, redemptive, and words signaling greater awareness. The book itself is a movement almost poetic from inner human conflict to an awakening into truth, freedom, and selflessness. Moreover, speaking of the scripture in John 11:25, and in terms of our deepest spiritual truth, these words are probably the greatest words uttered in the Bible. It is the foundation of spiritual awareness, meaning I am the resurrection and the life. You are the resurrection and the life. The moment we recognize and become aware of our connection to God. In the revealing word, it says, the resurrection takes place in us every time we rise to the awareness that we are connected to God. Tell me, are you currently connected? Have you tried to look inside yourself lately? Can you see your thoughts, beliefs, hopes, and dreams? Can you describe where you may be conflicted or double-minded? Are you aware of who you are being? Are you being a better, more selfless human being than you were before these dark times? It is a far, far better thing that you do. Deborah King says spiritual progress is born out of self-awareness. You see, being self-aware is a critical part of our spiritual journey. In fact, without this basic quality, there can be no hope of spiritual or psychological growth. Self-awareness is the very stepping stone towards expanded consciousness and experiences such as increased connection with God, greater self-understanding, extra compassion, and heightened love for ourselves and others. Self-awareness is the ability to soul search and be aware of your own thoughts, feelings, impulses, physical sensations, and behaviors. At a fundamental level, self-awareness is the ability to pay attention to who you are and what makes you tick physically and spiritually. At more complex levels, self-awareness involves developing an understanding of your deeper beliefs, inner wounds, unforgiveness, faults, mental and emotional defense mechanisms, and your repressed unconscious substance. It actually breeds self-understanding. J. Bugental, he said, without awareness, we are not truly alive. Or better yet, I prefer the words of Virginia Woolf, who said, without self-awareness, we are as babies in the cradles. Without self-awareness, we are as babies in the cradles. Consider this true story, if you will. A man sat at a metro station in Washington, D.C. and started to play the violin. It was a cold December morning. He played 6 Bach pieces for about 45 minutes. During that time, since it was rush hour, it was calculated that at least 1,000 people went through the station, most of them on their way to work. 3 minutes went by and a middle-aged man noticed there was a musician playing. He slowed his pace and stopped for a few seconds and then hurried up to meet his schedule. A minute later, the violinist received his first dollar tip. A woman threw the money in the till and, without stopping, continued to walk. A few minutes later, someone leaned against the wall to listen to him. But the man looked at his watch and started to walk again. Clearly, he was late for work. The man who paid the most attention, the one who paid the most attention was a 3-year-old boy. His mother dragged him along, hurried, but the child stopped to look at the violinist. Finally, the mother pushed hard and the child continued to walk, turning his head all the time. In the 45 minutes the musician played, only 6 people stopped and stayed for a while. About 20 gave him money but continued to walk their normal pace. When he finished playing and silence took over, no one noticed. No one applauded. There was no recognition of any kind. He collected $32. No one knew this, but the violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the greatest musicians in the world. And in the previous 45 minutes, he played one of the most intricate pieces of music ever written with a Gibson violin worth $3.5 million. 2 days before his playing in the subway, Joshua Bell sold out at a theater in Boston for an average of $100 per seat. Joshua Bell playing incognito in the metro station was part of a social experience organized by the Washington Post. The question being studied was, in a commonplace environment at an inappropriate hour, do we perceive beauty? Do we stop to appreciate it? Do we recognize talent in an unexpected context? The findings of this experience proved if we do not have a moment to stop and listen to one of the best musicians in the world playing the best music ever written on one of the finest instruments ever created, how many other things are we missing? In fact, do you appreciate and recognize what I am saying and doing as you are watching this service? Well, do you? John Waterhouse, in his book 5 Steps to Freedom, writes, ours is to become aware, ever more aware of the presence of spirit in everything that we see, hear, taste, smell, feel, and know. Friends, we must become aware that God is in everything that we experience and encounter. Are you with me? You see, developing self-awareness is important because without it, we can easily become stuck in toxic patterns for years, even an entire lifetime, as many people do. It is the very foundation of all emotional, psychological, and spiritual growth. A lack of self-awareness results in living an inauthentic and chaotic life that is driven by untamed impulses, unconscious habits, and unquestioned beliefs. To put it simply, self-awareness is so important because without it, we become self-destructive. How many times have you come across people who make the same mistakes over and over again? These people lack self-awareness. How many times have you seen people thrive on drama and self-destructive behavior? These people lack self-awareness. What about high achievers who are also impatient and anxious? These people, they lack self-awareness. What about those who live most of their life in boring, stagnant, and meaningless routines? These people lack self-awareness. You get where I'm coming from now? Every human problem or shortcoming can be traced back to a lack of self-awareness. Lao Tzu said, "He who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened." Are you a self-aware person? Think about this question for a minute. How conscious are you really of the many thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that you exhibit during the day? Listen, if you tend to do any of the following, and I mean any of the following, you probably lack self-awareness. Maybe you're often unaware that your words or actions have hurt or offended another person until they express it to you. Or you're self-destructive and continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. Or you perceive being patronizing or condescending to others as a way of being helpful. Maybe you have trouble identifying what you are feeling or thinking. You constantly trip over, bump into, fall off, drop, lose, or spill things. You get frustrated easily or lash out at others when they don't do things your way. Maybe you interpret or assume things about others that ends in arguments and ill feelings. You might struggle to identify what your true needs or desires are. You're impulsive, or you have a habit of behaving pessimistically without thinking. What about you're often surprised by people's perception of you as they don't match how you see yourself? Pema Chodron, he said, the most fundamental aggression to ourselves, the most fundamental harm we can do to ourselves is to remain ignorant by not having the courage and respect to look at ourselves honestly and gently. Friends, there is hope, and that is to make becoming self-aware a personal mission. When you become a model of self-awareness, others around you will also be positively influenced. You actually come to be the change you wish to see in the world. Why? Because self-awareness is the number one thing you can do to make big shifts in your life. Daniel Chidiac, he said, being self-aware is not the absence of mistakes, but the ability to learn and correct them. Here are some of the many benefits of self-awareness. You become more authentic and empowered to be yourself. You develop a stronger connection with your intuition and inner wisdom. You come into connection with your higher self. Your relationships become more loving and peaceful. You're more likely to discover your life purpose. You're able to overcome addictions more easily. You become more self-supportive rather than self-sabotaging. You feel more confident in social situations. You're able to change negative habits and mindsets. You're able to take care of your health much more effectively. You live a more fulfilling life that is based on your values, not others. You feel more connected to your soul. You feel more connected with existence. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." The unexamined life is not worth living. Friends, there's a greatness within you, a greatness ready to be fully awakened and examined. You are the resurrection and the life, and it's time you move away from an it's the best of times or worst of times way of looking at times and move into a far, far better way of being. Developing self-awareness is the foundation of all important life changes and deep inner work. The more self-aware you are, the more you can understand, accept, and love yourself. And the more you love yourself, the more you can understand, accept, and love others. Can you see how everything is connected? Lawrence Bossidy, he said, self-awareness gives you the capacity to learn from your mistakes as well as your successes. It enables you to keep growing. Self-awareness enables you to keep growing. Yes, self-awareness is the essential building block of growth, inner transformation, and spiritual awakening. Without self-awareness, there can be no emotional, psychological, or spiritual growth. Without self-awareness, we can't experience the joy of living in healthy relationships, finding meaningful jobs, or even just appreciating day-to-day existence. Without self-awareness, we remain stuck in patterns of anxiety, weariness, weakness, trauma, fatigue, or disassociation. Today, each of us must move to build a greater level of self-awareness for ourselves, others, and the Spirit of God that lives within us. Because just like Joshua Bell, the great concert violinist, playing in the subway, all of God's presence, power, plenty, peace, poise, prosperity, and miracles, all of it is right in front of us. We just have to be aware of it. So take the time today and move forward knowing that God is in the midst of you. Allow yourself to come forth knowing who you are and come into a new relationship with being who you are. It's a far, far better thing that you do. Are you willing to do this with me today? Well, thank you all, and God bless you.